There have to be some sort of understanding or coexistence between people and elephants.
Respecting it's their home, it's their habitat too.
The elephant is not just left on its own to deal with the grief, or any wildlife in this case.
Who is the one that is actually encroaching? We are.
Yeah.
Who is the problem? We are the problem.
Hello everyone, welcome to another episode of Beyond the Headlines, the go-to space for the top stories that made the headlines and more. My name is Amalina Kamal.
And I'm Hazwin Hassan.
The recent tragedy in Gurik, where an elephant calf was killed after being hit and pinned under a truck, has shaken the nation.
Its mother stood by the lifeless body for over 5 hours, a heartbreaking sight that really struck a nerve with Malaysians.
But more than just sorrow, it's raised serious questions. Now, why did this have to happen? And why isn't enough being done to stop these human-wildlife conflicts?
And so for this, in this segment, we have wildlife expert Dr. Wong E. Fin and our very own Life and Times writer Elena Koshi, who recently travelled to Perak and brought us this story. Let's take a look.
Last Mother's Day, a young elephant was fatally struck along the Great Gili Highway. Its mother stood by the lorry, pushing it with her head, desperately trying to reach her son, who was trapped beneath. She stood there for hours, unmoving in her sorrow, until the authorities had no choice but to sedate her and lead her back into the wild. The image of a grieving mother, mourning her child, shattered hearts across the nation, drowning out even the stories of human motherhood. This was not the first time we have heard of a wildlife vehicle collision. On 17 September 1894, near Teluk Anson, now Teluk Intan, a male elephant met a similar fate, struck by a steam train. Witnesses said the elephant had stood on the tracks before the train collided with him, derailing the locomotive and killing the animal. It was said to stand 8 feet tall, weighing over 4,000 kilograms. His trunk, nearly 2.5 meters long, and part of his front leg were severed in the impact. Hugh Norman Evans, a British anthropologist, ethnographer, and archaeologist, who spent most of his working life in Peninsular British Malaya, said the elephant's tusk was the heaviest ever recorded in the Malay Peninsula at the time. The incident left such an impression on the British colonial authorities that they erected a memorial in his honor, one that still stands today, though weathered by time and largely forgotten. The elephant's skull and ivory tusks were once displayed at the Perak Museum in Taiping, but they have since been moved into storage. Its hip bones, nearly a meter tall, were exhibited at the KTMB Mini Museum in Johor Bahru, a space now permanently closed. In both cases, 130 years apart, the elephants were not lost. They were following paths that existed long before roads and rail, paths that today lead into danger. Between 2016 and 2021, more than 2,500 animals were killed on Malaysian roads, among them endangered souls fighting for survival. Human-elephant conflict is no longer rare. It has become routine, and every collision is not just a tragedy, it is a reminder. Until we confront the cause, we will continue to count the dead, and the elephants will continue to remember.
Now, we'll start with you first, Dr. Wong. Over 130 years on, history unfortunately repeats itself. Then a collision with a train, and recently on May 11th, a truck. Despite mitigation efforts, why are elephants still being killed on our highways? And are the current measures proving ineffective, or are they not being enforced properly?
Okay, to understand the situation surrounding the accident, we have to look at the site. The Great Gili Highway cut across a mountainous range. Even on normal days without elephants on the road, I see cars involved in accidents. They crash into embankment, especially after rain when the road is slippery. And if during night, if visibility is low, then the risk of accident actually increases, because there is steep slopes, corners and all that. From my research on elephants in Gurik Jali, my project has collared about 20-something elephants on that road, and we found that elephants often cross at night. In fact, 80% of the crossing occurs at night and 20% during daytime. So if you combine all these factors together, the nature of the road, the safety aspects, together with the wildlife behavior on the elephant side, and when we add in drivers driving at night, sometimes there's less car, they could be driving faster. But even for large trucks, even if they're driving slow, it still takes time for them to brake because of the momentum. So considering all this factor, it's actually not so safe to drive on Gurik Jali Road at night compared to daytime. Yeah.
So the recent, I suppose, roadkill incident could have been prevented if we actually knew about the traffic, or at least the movements of these elephants, or at least wildlife coming in, actually populating during the nighttime then? Or do you think patrol is not enough, or warning signs are not enough?
Let me elaborate a bit more on the efforts taken by the different agencies and authorities on that road. So they have constructed viaducts, they have constructed signboards, LED lights, rumble strips. There are now recent calls for speed bumps and all. But all these measures are trying to influence the driver's behavior to slow down. Yeah, for the wildlife crossing, like the viaduct, it works to a certain extent. But because this is a very long road, and there's a lot of crossing left and right of the road, so the elephants can cross at any point on the road, and therefore it is not so easy to carry out mitigation measures. Yeah. So the best effort, I would say the most logical or pragmatic effort that we can do now is try to work with the local authorities. Perhaps they can set up a R&R in Bersia, Gurik area, and also in Jali, Kelantan. Perhaps during evening, the road users can actually stop and rest at this R&R. There could be homestays or budget hotels for them to rest. And in the morning, when there's enough sunlight, yeah, for visibility, and when it's more safer for them to traverse past that road, then they can go.
Are elephants as curious as other wildlife when they see traffic, or when they see moving vehicles, lights and everything like that? Could that have been the factor in terms of why they're so drawn to that area?
From the research that MIM, Management Ecology of Malaysian Elephants, carried out, we have, from the data, noticed that the elephants do tend to gather around the roadside. Yeah, they could be sources of food for them, and there could be important habitat or resources for them along the road. So it is high probability, yes, elephants will be beside the road. And if you add in the factor that that road is also an important road for, Gurik Jali connecting Perak and Kelantan, so we can see that all these different elements increases the risk of an accident. But if you look at the driver's behavior, I think this is a very important aspect that we can try to increase the safety, for the users and also for elephants on the road. Through my research that I carried out in Perak, I observed the driver's behavior. Sometimes they do try to slow down for the elephants and stop, and allow the elephants to cross. Sometimes the cars even will give signal to each other, to show that there's something in front, they have to slow down. So all these, I would say, it's a form of coexistence. And an understanding between the drivers and the elephants. So if the cars slow down and stop, the elephants will then cross. That is their behavior. They are very used to crossing on the road. But I'm a bit concerned, like with these recent incidents of accidents on the road. How will that then change the behavior of the elephants? There's a recent accident now with the car that stopped, and because the car behind honked, and the elephants got angry. So we are trying to reduce such incidents from happening. Yeah. So that is why perhaps one of the measures is try to reduce the probability of cars encountering elephants at night on that road by reducing the number of vehicles. But of course, when the number of vehicles reduce, we expect sometimes people will actually speed up because the road is clear. So that is also dangerous if the cars are speeding. So we also need to also have some sort of enforcement, try to manage the speed of the vehicles on the road. Yeah.
And like you earlier mentioned, respecting it's their home, it's their habitat too. So that means more on our part. We have to be more civic minded, right?
If we can come up with measures that brings benefit for the local community and also for the wildlife, I would call it a win-win situation. Yeah.
Okay. Well, now I'd like to move on to you, Elena, and on the story you wrote recently. From your trip to Perak, what did you learn there? And as a reporter, as a journalist, how do you balance storytelling with advocacy in stories like this?
Okay, so this was a report that we did not too long ago. When we went to Perak, it was not it was by the off chance that we decided to go and look for this elephant memorial, so to speak. So I think when we went to Teluk Ensen, that was where the elephant memorial was, it's weird because the memorial is right smack in the middle of a neighborhood. So it's like you have all these little aunties watering their plants, and suddenly by the off chance it's just on the side there. You just walk a little and here it was this signboard put up by the British that says, herein lies an elephant who in defense of his herd attacked a train. And then you get to think that imagine this, that right now everything is developed. I mean, who would think that there are elephants in Teluk Intan of all the places in the world? But think about it as Malaysia was one big contiguous forest during that time, back in 1894 when it happened. And in 1894, when the British built the railway tracks, it was cutting through forest paths, migratory paths that animals walk. So here we have a track and here we have a train that's coming. And we may never know what triggered that elephant because there's so many legends attached to it, but what triggered the elephant to actually attack a train? Because right now we can ask the same question, what triggered the elephant to attack the car? So there could be so many factors involved. So as a journalist, of course, we want to find what is the significance of this historical site. But for me, when I look at it and when I see, imagine September 17, 1894, it's a report even in the Straits Times. It was a small little report in the Straits Times on September 25th, just a small report saying that this elephant attacked the train. So we have human-wildlife conflict even back then. But it's sad because human-wildlife conflict has been occurring ever since development and ever since we progressed as a nation. But again, we are at what expense?
Just enlighten us a little bit when you engage with the people there who knew about the story. Are they very well aware in terms of this balance that they need to achieve between, living in an environment that's already lived, that already have its own habitat?
Because if you're talking about the community that's there at this present time, there isn't any issue about human-wildlife conflict because it's been cleared. It's a town.
Yeah, so part of what MIM's study showed, the elephant range in human-dominated landscape in Peninsular Malaysia have shrunk by about 60%. Yeah, so in the remaining habitat where we still have elephants and people, 2/3 are experiencing conflict. So that's why we need to work with the community so that they can coexist with the wildlife in the same area. Without the acceptance from the community, then we will have clashes. So that's why I emphasize a lot on having to work with the local community, getting their buy-in, because a lot of all these measures that we want to implement, at the end of the day, the community has to live with it and agree to it.
Right.
Yeah.
And Doctor, previously before we started rolling, we were talking about how, or comparing in how different sort of, where you have clashes between elephants and humans, it can be different depending on the location. We were talking about places, commonly we hear about Gurik, with the, crossing there,
Yes.
the Jalan Gurik Jali, and then in Perak, and then also in Johor. And we were talking about
Yes,
Johor. You
thank
told
you.
me it was interesting how clashes there happen. So maybe you can
I started work in Johor in around 2021. From our monitoring of elephants in Johor, we find similar road crossing behavior. The elephants tend to cross 80% mostly at night and 20% during daytime. And there are differences between elephant individuals. Some crosses more, some crosses less. But yes, I think for accidents, try to reduce accidents from happening, because both we have elephants and people in sharing the same landscape. Yeah, and the road is cutting across, forest areas and all. There have to be some sort of understanding or coexistence between people and elephants. That's why a lot of measures, or a lot of the mitigation measures, try to influence human behavior to try to slow down, especially at wildlife crossing or passages. But as usual, as we drive up and down the road every day, we tend to, desensitize ourselves, and then it become like part of the landscape. We forget about the lights or the signboard, and we just speed. So that could happen. So that is why the effort to try to live together in the same landscape, a lot of awareness. That's where the media can come in to try to create this awareness, so that people realize that, okay, if I cross this area, there are elephants here, so I need to slow down. So try to reduce the chance of vehicle collision. So elephant vehicle collision occurs in Peninsular Malaysia. Maybe some year we get 1 case or 2 cases. Some years we don't have any cases at all. So actually influencing drivers' behavior can be a very important key, for us to reduce the number of accident cases.
Well, let's go back to the recent incident. I understand it's not an isolated one, but the fact that the mother elephant was just watching over the baby calf after you got hit by the truck for over 5 hours, and then the next day Perhilitan had to come and literally console and move it, right? I just want to understand the behavior behind that, and maybe our audience also want to know, like, how strong does elephant have when it comes to emotions, memory, and how should we rehabilitate animals or wildlife such as this to go back to normal?
Yeah. So there were 2 videos circulating. There's one video that showed the elephant running around the truck frantically, trying to reach to the baby that's underneath the truck. You can see that she's in a very stressful state. The ears are held up straight, and she's just running around the truck. And there is a second video that circulates a lot, whereby you see the elephant standing with her head pressed against the truck, as if she's trying to move the truck, but then she has no energy to do so. From what I understand, the wildlife department reached to the incident place, and they have no choice but to sedate the elephant so that it is safe enough for their personnel to get close.
Right.
Yeah. So when the elephant is sedated, they are still standing up, but basically they are kind of like in a dream state. Perhaps in her dream she was still trying to reach out to the baby, when she's standing next to the truck. And it took, I think 3 or 4 4-wheel drive to pull her away from that accident area, and then try to pull her into the forest. I'm hoping that she belongs to a herd, because elephants, they have emotions quite similar to people, human, They can grieve, they have joy, and they also have the ability to empathize. Perhaps you have seen videos of, mahout and their elephants, and when the mahout fell in the river and the elephant just rushed and tried to save the mahout. So they have the ability to reach out and help each other if they are in a herd. So I'm hoping that the mother elephant has a herd waiting for her in the forest that can help to console her.
But what sort of human intervention in the rehabilitation sort of like state or a phase that we can, take on to ensure that the elephant is not just left on its own to deal with the grief in that sense, or any wildlife in this case?
Because this is a wild elephant, bringing the elephant in captivity will actually cause more, trauma in some sense. So her being able to go back to the forest to be with other elephants, I think that is
The best thing.
the suitable course of action for that incident.
No, because we're just addressing certain questions that people may have. They might not understand it, right?
And sort of adding on to what you just asked, because you see a lot of, say, I know we've seen this before, like an orangutan who's just lost its offspring, its child, and then again, because they were raised in captivity, so it was allowed to then be given another species altogether. So sometimes they're mothering a tiger cub or a completely different species to sort of fill in that void left behind from the death of their child.
I feel for the elephants in Gurik Jali Highway, they have been there for many years, and with the community that's living there, possibly some have encountered elephants by the roadside and all. So there is some sort of like a coexistence with the local community. But I guess the issue is over time, sometimes, accidents happen. It could be maybe number of vehicles have increased, or it could be there's food sources near to the road that is attracting them there. So we need to consider all these factors into coming up with solutions. But if you ask me what is the most immediate action can be taken is reducing the number of vehicles on the road, and controlling the speed could be one way. Logically, practically speaking, seeing that the highway is on a mountainous terrain and can be dangerous to drive, especially at night when visibility is low, so putting all this safety aspect, elephant behavior aspect, human behavior aspect, that could be one approach, because everyone is trying to push for what can we do now. So for long-term measures, of course, continuous monitoring of the elephant population, their behavior. There are talks about maybe we can make a food bank for the elephants, like grassy area, across the lake, that we can attract the elephants there, further away from the road. These are possibilities that we can explore, but it will need to take time, to carry out. Even if you say construction or whatever, it will take time to carry out.
I think that at the end of the day, because when we spoke to the Perak Perhilitan Director Tuan Haji Yusof Shari, he was also saying that, yes, creating a viaduct, that's what they've done. He was also advising that, having a time to travel, because between 10 a.m. to 4 p.m., that would be a perfect time to travel through that. Not to say perfect, but safer time to travel through that area, and not travel after 4 p.m., in the dark and all that. So maybe enforcing a time zone where people can actually travel. But again, enforcement means more manpower is needed. And he was saying that because it's such a long stretch, and yes, there are people stationed to chase away elephants or to distract them or to get them off the roads, but elephants don't follow our timing or schedule and ways where, because in that area alone there are 40 identified elephant crossings. 40. How are you going to control when they come out, how often they come out, and and things like that? So I think Dr. Wong has raised a very pertinent point. We have to coexist with them. We have to learn to coexist with them. And I think even during those times when I used to travel, when I was working with a nature organization and traveling the Gurik Jali Highway, and we encounter elephants as well, we just have to coexist.
How much of an importance do the local community, or at least the indigenous population within that area, play a part in having to create this sort of social dynamic or at least interaction between human and wildlife here?
In Belum Temenggur, there's a lot of projects, wildlife related, that is also working with community by different organizations. I think Rimau's work on wildlife enforcement, where they hire the
Orang
asli, to be the ranger patroller, is one good way of getting them involved and earning an income out of it and getting recognized for their effort. And then we also have like Malaysian Nature Society. They have a hornbill project where they collect the honey and they sell the honey, and then they make bee wax cloth and things like that. And there's a lot of other projects are hiring people from the local community to do research work, camera traps, or collecting seeds in the forest. I think TRCRC are hiring some of the local community as well. All these can be considered as important way to coexist with the community and getting them to see that, you know, having wildlife around is a chance for them to preserve their traditions and the environment. But of course, with elephants, it's always been tricky because there's conflict going on. Sometimes the elephants will push down their houses or raid their crops. We do have some efforts with the local indigenous community in terms of outreach, and right now we are trying to set up a project whereby we try to test up some fences to with sound. Yeah, this is more to alert the community whenever elephants are near, so that they are aware. But we are still trying to push for that project to be run, and then we see whether will it be successful or not. So some of the efforts are going on, but I think, of course, if there are support from the local authorities and also the community themselves, it will be much better.
No, so the reason behind my question was that because I want to look into a scenario whereby this sort of conflict does not reduce the tolerance that we have towards wildlife again, because we have to understand that we coexist in the same space at the end of the day, and I suppose almost half of the world is also inhabited by wildlife species.
I also think that that's where even media plays a role, because I was just thinking about this, because we keep saying human wildlife conflict, but we have to bear in mind that the elephants were there before us, that was a forest before there was a road, you know, and that was their path, you know, and we came in, we set our human boundaries, and we expect the elephants not to encroach in our human boundaries. So the question is, who is the interloper? Who is the one that is actually encroaching? We are. Who is the problem? We are the problem. So the thing is, I think the narrative needs to be flipped. You know, not by saying, yes, there's a conflict because these animals are entering our place, but it's actually we are entering their space. So how we coexist, I think we need to flip that messaging across.
Of course, we have all these different narratives out there, but when we work with local community, I find that emphasizing on their safety is very important. Yeah, because their family, if they are living in that landscape with elephants, safety is of priority to them. Actually, I really enjoy this conversation. It shows that we are going to all the different levels of coexistence between people and wildlife. There are, I guess, different viewpoints or mindset or which point of view we are looking at. Sorry, because of my work with the community, I always tend to put on the hat of, okay, from the community aspect, this is what I have to observe and pay attention to. But yes, the need for conserving and protecting our wildlife and forests is there. Yes, we understand that, you know, especially in Peninsula Malaysia, we have lost forest habitat, and now their estimation is about 40% of forest. But this 40% includes forest plantations and all these other activities in there. You know? So for wildlife, we want to make sure that we still have our endangered species, our wildlife, our elephants, tigers, hornbills, sun bears, all, yeah. Then we have to find ways for people and wildlife. Yes, there's some space that is for wildlife, some space there are for people, but there's some space where there are overlaps. Yeah, there is. There's no fixed boundary of sort. Yeah, like what Elena said, the wildlife move around. So I think we have to move away from the narrative of there's a boundary. So we need to remove that boundary and see how can we work with people and wildlife moving in that landscape. So going to landscape-based approaches.
I think what the problem is really is that we think we're the highest up on the food chain when clearly it's not the case. We are so far removed from the natural, habitat that, if I may, that God intended. We think that we are so superior when it's not. If we were to directly put ourselves in, with wildlife, with nature out there, we are going to be so down that food chain. Because above us, we've got the apex predators, we've got the tigers, the bears, and then finally you have the king of the jungle, at least in the tropics here, which are the elephants.
I think Perilitan, I think for 3 kampongs in Perak, they have, I don't know whether it's a great answer to anything, but having electric fences to prevent wildlife from entering, or things like that. They are working with the communities there as well.
But having to completely cut off that migration path, or the route that all this wildlife are so used to, because it's part of their basically nature, right? It's part of them. What's the implication to that, Doctor?
Yes, there's a lot of viewpoints on how best to do this. Yeah. Again, it has to go by area. So some measures, at small scale, it may work. For example, you may fence up one area and it work very well. But once you scale it up and cut across a large landscape, then you actually create other problems, because this fence sometimes will lead the elephants to go to the neighboring area,
which might not necessarily be there. They're not familiar with the topography of the area even, right?
Yes, all these factors we have to take into consideration, especially some measures may work in certain scales, but at larger scales it could cause other issues, other problems. I'm working very closely with the oil palm plantations actually, and there's a lot of researchers in Sabah is also doing the same, to try to find how agriculture sector can coexist with elephants. So we are moving away from the road a little bit, so into agriculture sector. So for the agriculture plantations, they have their resources. They have manpower, they have people with knowledge as well, on the ground, and they have the areas. So what we do is we collaborate with them, and we recognize that actually if we have movement pathway for elephants, and if we have places where the elephant can stop and feed and then move on, around, it could be considered as part of coexisting together in that landscape. We can have areas where endangered species like elephants or even tigers crossing, and other wildlife, and it helps to connect between forest patches, especially since now the forest in Peninsular Malaysia is fragmented. There's need for ecological linkages to link these forest patches up. So if we can work together with the agriculture sector, then there's a higher chance that we are able to save this species. Yes, we say that humans are not on top of the food chain anymore and things like that, but honestly, human action does matter a lot for the animals on the ground. The decisions by the stakeholders to whether to put aside a bit of riparian reserve for the animals to walk or not actually matters a lot.
Right. You talked about how they sometimes eat the crops, and that obviously will create losses for farmers. But perhaps the government could then step in. This is where I think intervention is necessary, where they could maybe provide incentives to farmers,
Right.
to people in the agriculture sector, that, okay, you just have to acknowledge the fact that we are coexisting. So yes, the elephants, as nature intended, they will come in and find food, in search for food, and they will get to, the easy pickings. So maybe through incentives, would it be a good idea to have the government say, okay, let them eat your crops, then we'll, offset, in some other way, offset your losses through something else.
When we look at this approach of working together with the agriculture sector, there's a lot of factors to consider. Yeah. And honestly, I collaborate a lot with researchers from Sabah. We combine our research findings together, and we create awareness materials, and we try to. I invite them. I invite researchers from Sabah to come over to Peninsula to share about their work with my stakeholders, and I feel that the current scenario in Malaysia is that the agriculture sector, the oil palm plantations, they are willing to listen. They are willing to sit down and discuss, which is really good. Yeah.
That's a start. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes. Yes. So I think it's not the effort of one person, but a combination of many people.
It has to be.
Indeed.
Yeah.
And I think recently you heard about Dr. Nuza Farina Othman. She won the
Whitley Award.
The Whitley Award. It is considered like the
Right.
Green Oscar,
Right.
for her efforts with the plantations. I think that is a recognition internationally.
There have been interventions and there have been, I suppose, small successes that we can recognize, right? But I suppose I just want to highlight, because at the heart of this conversation is to talk about how we can balance between having to live for ourselves as humans and
right.
having to also respect our environment and our surrounding. And I know that we went off scale a little bit about the agricultural aspect, but I do want to also highlight that not everything is about profits. Not everything is about
shouldn't be,
dollars and
yeah.
cents. I think it should be a fine balance between how we can fend for ourselves, food security, and having to help, or the bigger context of it, improve our GDP. But if we don't appreciate this aspect of our life or what makes the country good or unique, then what's the point of it all, right?
At the heart of it is education and awareness, because we are so far removed from what happens
There
in
you
the
go.
forest,
Yeah.
because we are here in the cities.
Exactly.
And we don't think that these kind of things will affect us.
Yeah.
But there is a big, huge circle of life, because they play their ecological role, and that's what make our lives easier here. But I think at the end, like setting up a natural history museum, raising awareness, even from schools, educating people about the environment, because I think those are important things that we need to start. And I think education at a younger age will raise up environmental stewards.
That's right.
Right, that's true.
Elena, I couldn't agree with you more. And I think that's why we have to bring up this talk about understanding the food chain here, because you
Yes.
take away, you remove your technology, you remove your roofs above your heads, you remove your cars. What do we have left? Remove your clothing even. What do we have left?
Not to that extreme, I
We've
suppose.
got our fallings and that's it.
I will not survive. I'll be the first to tell you that.
Well, yeah. Again, Elena, thank you for correcting the phrase here. We shouldn't be highlighting it as a human-wildlife conflict, but something else, something more progressive, right? Something more forward-thinking and more inclusive in that sense.
I think coexistence.
Coexistence, yeah.
Yeah.
That's true.
Respect. RESPECT.
I know, right? Exactly.
Yes. And with that, I'd like to thank our guest that's on site, Dr. Wong Evin, for being here on Beyond the Headlines. Thank you so much, Doctor, for being here and sharing your insights.
Thank you for having me.
Truly appreciate the time that you've spent with us today.
Yeah.
And Elena, thank you so much for making time for
Yeah,
us.
thank
Yeah.
you.
And to our audience back at home, if you like this particular episode, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. Don't forget to also turn on the notification bell if you haven't already. You'll not only get Beyond the Headlines update, other NSC Online's news report will be delivered to you. My name is Amalina Kamal, and I'll see you next week.